most of the data that we have available is lagging data. We want to know what the market's doing right now. The market's always changing. We could look at data from 20 years ago. It's not going to be relevant.
So every episode is a little different, and it's one of the most shocking things that I think about the real estate industry is that everyone thinks it's all about the numbers, but really it's all about the mindset that you approach those numbers with. So I'm really excited to be talking to Ryan Bruen today. He's an agent in New Jersey at Coldwell Banker, and he thinks about real estate in a different way. That different way of thinking has helped him grow his team's business to over 31 transactions in 2025 at a really great price point. So Ryan, welcome to the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt.
So why don't we just get started? Like, what's your story? So I know you kind of ousted your mom as the team leader a couple of years ago. I'm just kidding. I'm sure she wanted some time, to take time to give you the opportunity. But, you've been part of a family team, but you've really been growing your business in a big way over the last couple of years. And I just want to hear your story. How'd you get into it? And what kind of pivots have you made along the way?
Yeah. So I'm third generation real estate. My grandfather owned his own brokerage. My father started out working with him. So I grew up in the business. And a lot of people think it was a natural, that's how I got into the business. But honestly, I fought really, really hard to try to avoid getting into the business for many years. I started my career in accounting. I also worked in independent film production, graphic design, worked with some startup businesses in the music industry. So I really didn't just naturally jump into the family business. And then when I did get into real estate, I was living in New York City, in Manhattan. I had no intention of joining up with the family or moving to the suburbs. After, my short stint in accounting in New York, I mean, the real estate's just really interesting. So I was really intrigued and found myself always being drawn to the real estate. And at the time, I always thought, well, this is city real estate. It's totally different than anywhere else, especially the boring suburbs. And then I quickly learned that while there are differences to different markets, overall, a lot of the day-to-day, a lot of the expertise, a lot of the business is very similar from a city market to a suburban market. And with that being, at that point, I realized having the roots that I had in New Jersey real estate, it was only a natural fit to move out of the city and take advantage of those kind of head start that I had.
Well, it's interesting too, and I hear this story a lot, right? Because I'm in the suburbs, and a lot of my friends, we all move to a big city or to a different city, and we stay there for a couple of years after college, but then we all move back. So I feel like part of that for you that also likely worked is that at the same time you were thinking about your transition back to Jersey, a lot of your friends were doing the same thing. So it almost like kind of hopefully feeds your business that first year, because other people like you that are, your CRM contacts are oftentimes thinking about the same thing. And there needs to be at least one realtor in every group like that.
Yeah.
Which definitely doesn't hurt. So, you came back, but how did you actually get your first couple of deals? Because I think you did mention that misnomer, right? Like, just because you joined a family team, it means that what it does mean is that you were familiar with, real estate terminology all throughout the last, 30 years of growing up. But it didn't necessarily lead to like immediate deals, I'm assuming, because, if your parents had a deal, they wanted to make the money themselves on that. Like, we're all a little bit selfish. So how did you actually break into it and start getting your first couple deals when you came back and kind of rejoined that family business?
So I was actually really surprised how, for my first year in real estate, when I was in the city, everybody struggles when they first break into the business. And a lot of people talk about, all right, join a team. And at the time, my managers and a lot of people said, don't join a team. Like, it seems like it'll be that big boost you need. But ultimately, it's, you gotta hustle and you gotta bring your own business in. None of these teams are just going to hand you business. But what I found to be a huge benefit from moving out to the suburbs, partnering up with my mother, is just simply having exposure to deals. Anybody that works in the real estate business knows you go and interview with a bunch of these brokerages, they're all going to tout their education and their training. And I've seen everybody's out there, and there's really not much to it in terms of their training. The only real way to learn sufficiently in this business is by doing. And if you first start in the business and you have no deals going on, forget about not making any money. You're not learning and you're not growing. So by simply partnering with my mother, I had access to experience deals, whether, it was translating money or not. And I just made it a point to show up to everything that was going on in any one of her deals, whether it was a listing appointment, whether it was meeting an inspector to pick up a radon test, from the most important parts of the transaction to the most mundane stuff. It was simply showing up and observing and being a part of that really gave me the knowledge and the confidence to then transition into doing my own deals, to the point where I don't even know if I could identify where my own deals started through the history, because I just viewed it as a full team sport and got myself involved in everything that the team was doing.
I love that. I mean, I think, I've talked a lot about on the show before about how, it takes 10,000 hours to master something. And, realistically, if you jump into the industry and you're doing it on your own, but you have absolutely nothing going on, you might never get to that mastery piece, and you'll end up doing a disservice to the couple clients you work with, which will likely be your friends and family, which will then hamper your ability to get referrals because you didn't help them that much. And it kind of sets you up for failure. Versus the agents who kind of hustle and say, like, you know what, I'm going to find a group or a team or somewhere to learn and train and earn my 10,000 hours. All of a sudden, at some point along that journey, if you have a decent personality and you're putting in the work, business will come. And I think that's something that a lot of people forget about.
And you don't even necessarily have to learn from what the other person is, quote unquote, doing. Like, that person might be great at their job. They might not be, but it's not so much observing to see how they're doing things, but just seeing how the deal plays out. You might look at everything they do and say, this is terrible, but at least I have the experience of the transaction to see how I would do it differently. So you're not going in blind on your first few deals.
Well, the other big thing I think of is, because we do all of our training like that, right? So like if a lender wants to start here, they can't just go out and start closing loans. They have to train under one of our existing lenders who's doing a lot of business. And the reason for that is we want them to hear how we talk to customers, but more importantly, we want them to hear all of the crazy stories so that they have stuff to say. Like, we want to make sure that like they have interesting stories to tell all the time, so that when they're out having a beer, when they're on the golf course, they're always talking about their job, what happened at work that day. And in essence, what that becomes is these testaments of success. Like, how did we solve the really hard deal? Because usually what people talk about is something hard, challenging, difficult. And that's really how you attract new customers. So I think part of what you also get from getting busy at the beginning by mentoring, by having a mentor, a team, a someone, is you'll have stuff to talk about. And I always encourage agents, like, even if you have none of your own business, like, go on showing, see as many houses as you can per week, figure out a way to like immerse yourself in real estate, because it becomes a thing. Then when people ask you, what did you do yesterday? You can talk about real estate, and it makes you seem more active, even if they're not necessarily your deals.
I tell the new agents in my office this all the time. Stories sell. Not only do stories sell because they resonate and they're, connect and whatnot, but ultimately the customer doesn't want to hear, I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do this for you. Right. What they want to hear is, this is my scenario. These are my challenges I'm having. You have dealt with that successfully already. So yes, the longer you're in the business and the more you successfully navigate these transactions, you have these great stories to share. Anytime you come across a situation, not only do you have a solution, but you have a story to tell to share with your customer, your client, about how you've dealt with something like this and overcame it successfully. But if you don't have your own stories, you can easily borrow your colleagues' stories.
Heck yeah. Well, and then let's talk about just the elephant in the room. Like, when you're interviewing with a customer, they're primed to ask you as a realtor, what your commission is, and they're primed to ask you like why you're worth it over the other 10 million agents who all charge the exact same commission. I know we're like vaguely not or allowed to talk about commissions. I can't even keep the new rules straight these days. But at the end of the day, like, you can only talk so much about numbers. It's your commodity.
At the end of the day, you can tell how you're going to handle it. You can promise them that you're going to net more than you're going to gain them. The extra money you're going to gain them is more than what you're charging them. But that's just empty promises. How do they know you're going to deliver?
Right.
The best way to be able to exemplify is I have done this this time, this time, this time, and this time.
And like to tell those stories of saying like, listen, what I can tell you is that yes, I charge basically the same thing as everyone else. But what I can tell you is that these are three things, these problems that very well may come up in your transaction based on the city you're buying in, based on the type of property, based on everything else. And this is how I've saved the deal in the past for my clients to ensure that it doesn't affect them. And so all of a sudden you kind of flip the script on like, if you don't work with me, you're not going to be able to solve this situation when we run into it. And I think,
or as simple as I've dealt with somebody like you selling a house like yours, and when all was said and done, they felt that I was worth what I charged them.
Absolutely. And I love that. Well, let's talk about some other stuff. So you started in, Manhattan as a numbers guy. And I think now, you're just in New Jersey as a numbers guy, but selling real estate. Why don't you mentioned to me on the call before, that there's a lot that market data can't tell you unless you really know how consumers behave. So I want you to just explain what that means and kind of what market data might be misleading consumers out there.
So I think one of the biggest thing, we're in the information age. Any consumer can go to the internet and find a lot of the data that we would then analyze. They might not be able to analyze in the way we can, but they might. There's a lot of tools out there to help them do that. One of the biggest factors is most of the data that we have available is lagging data. We want to know what the market's doing right now. The market's always changing. We could look at data from 20 years ago. It's not going to be relevant to pricing a home, or marketing a home right now. And most of the data that we see that's publicly available is at least 30 days old, usually more like 60 or 90 days old. So number one, you need to be out there in the trenches, experiencing it to really understand what's happening in the current market. But you also need to be familiar and experienced enough to interpret that information and extrapolate that information that you're experiencing when the data is not yet available, and kind of infer what the data is going to look like when it comes out.
Well, I think the other big thing is like most data that's out there on the internet is void of all context, right? So right. I hear, oh my gosh, home prices are down by 4%, and that's the headline. And most people are dumb and they don't read past the headline. So then all of a sudden, I as a consumer have this idea that home prices are down, but is that like nationwide or is that in one state? Because I highly doubt that it's in your city. And I can tell you that nationwide, prices are flat, mainly because Florida and a couple other markets have driven prices down by, double-digit numbers. But I look at Traverse City, Michigan, which is like a little tiny area near me, and they have a direct flight from Manhattan. Their prices are up 17 to 18%. Mm-hmm. And it's only going up because now they're adding even more direct flights from Atlanta. And I think if someone in that area was thinking about not selling because the market was down, they'd be off by a factor of 20%, which on a $500,000 house is $100,000.
Yeah.
And that's serious math. You need the context. You need someone who can explain how to analyze that data for your local market and for the goals that you're trying to accomplish. Because the same data might mean very different things depending on whether you're hoping to buy, sell, invest, or do something else.
I also find a lot of consumers ask the wrong questions. Not to say, hey, I'm the expert, I know everything, and consumers don't know what they're talking about. But a lot of times people come to you with questions and thinking that all they want is the answer, where I find a lot of times the questions that people are asking are not the questions that they actually should be answering. The question is, they're asking you a question because they think that the information they're expecting in return is going to solve a problem that they're trying to solve. So rather than simply asking that question and getting an answer, what I'm usually doing is trying to find, okay, what is the problem that you're trying to solve that is causing you to ask this question? Because ultimately, that might not even be the right question. You're asking the question based on the data you're seeing, which is leading you into trying to get a certain answer, which is not necessarily the solution that you should be looking for.
Well, I mean, the other piece is I feel like we know this from psychology. People will ask you their first 2 or 3 questions will be the questions that they think they're supposed to ask. They won't even be the questions that they necessarily care about the answer to. It's almost like that awkward, you meet someone in an elevator and you have to talk to them. You're going to ask them, talk about the weather. You're going to comment on their outfit. You don't know what else to talk about. But, customers, when they talk to a lender, they ask about the interest rate. And when they talk to a realtor, they usually ask, how's the market? And
Yeah.
both questions a professional can give a great answer to that can lead to something positive, but you really need to put some practice into that and then really give them the question that they should have asked you and talk about that answer specifically. Why don't you just walk us through it? What if you're a buyer today or a seller today? What are the questions you should be asking?
That's a really good question. So as
And it's probably different, right? It's probably different for a buyer, a seller, an investor. So I guess
yeah,
we can
very
kind of
much
go through
different.
any of those separately.
Um, well, like a lot of the sellers, I'm getting, what's the best time to sell? And actually, I'm not even getting that question. I'm getting an inference from them, which is, um, when in the spring is the best time? Because I want the flowers to be in bloom. I want the sun to be shining. They're kind of looking at it one dimensionally, as opposed to what's the competition looking like. They're looking at buyer demand. Most sellers are looking at what's the buyer demand like. Not only when are the most buyers going to be out there, but when is my home going to show the best to those buyers? What a lot of times they're not looking at is, what does my competition look like at any given point in time? I see a lot of sellers miss the mark when attempting to time their home sale, because they're so focused on when are the most buyers out there, and when is my home going to be viewed most favorably versus what type of competition am I up against. You could be in the middle of winter where it's dark and gloomy and people really don't want to leave their houses, and your backyard is covered in snow and you're not really getting any natural light because it's cloudy, and there might not be a ton of buyers out there, but you're the only game in town, so those buyers are clamoring for you. You might wait till the flowers are in bloom in May and June, thinking, and all the buyers are out there thinking this is going to be great. Okay, you go on the market that same week, 10 other houses in your neighborhood go on the market, and while your home is great, okay, there's 5 times as many buyers on the market,
Right.
but they're all clamoring for that one house that's completely updated and completely move-in ready. And here you are in a time where everything's going in 3 days anymore, and a week goes by, your house is still on the market. They're saying, what's wrong with it? It's not there's anything wrong with your house. It's that while while you were sitting there for a week, everybody was trying to get that other house that was better than yours. And now week 2, week 3, they're coming back and saying, okay, now that I didn't get that, let me look at yours. Oh, there must be something wrong here because you've been on the market for 2, 3 weeks. That one went in 3 days.
My mentor once told me that the best time to buy or sell is always now because we can't predict the future.
Right.
Anything other than now is gambling, right? Like
Yeah.
when you're analyzing, like, should I sell right now? You look at your personal financial picture and your number one real estate or financial goal, and you say, does this make sense for us to do right now? Yes or no. If the answer is yes, you do it without thinking about the what ifs that the future could hold.
Right.
Because at the
Not
end of the
when
day,
is
we're
the
not
best time
fortune
to
tellers.
sell, is now a good time to sell.
Yeah, right. Like that's what it comes down to. Well, why don't you
Mhm.
walk me through? So I know you're in a very like the market you're in is very hyper local.
Mhm.
How do you like stay on top of that hyper local market? Like what kind of signals are you looking at to kind of figure out what the market is doing, and then like how do you translate that into like practical next steps for your customers?
Yeah. So I say the best way I'm keeping on top of the local market, like they said, the data that's out there is dated. It's really by being in it and transacting in it. I'm dealing with buyers and sellers every day at various points in their journey. So I'm not just closing deals tomorrow that I can tell you what deal we put together 2 months ago. I'm working with buyers who are bidding on properties and either getting them or not getting them. I'm working with sellers where we're in those bidding wars. We're seeing what the activity is in the open houses, what the showing activity is. But I'm also at any given point, have a bunch of potential buyers and sellers that aren't yet ready, that are asking questions and deciding if and when to jump into the market based on varying factors. So by working with enough clients in this market, I'm able to not only see what the market's doing, but how the consumers are behaving and the factors that are influencing their decisions to transact and how they're transacting, and finding commonalities amongst those to find trends. Oh, you're on mute. Matt, you're on mute.
Oh, what I said was, so let's say you're a new agent. Like, what do you do then? Like, you don't have all that new experience, all that experience from like current clients. What would you tell a new agent at your brokerage who said like,
Shadow.
I want to like spot these trends and then advise the one client that I have? Like, what do they do?
Shadow. Find an experienced agent that will be so nice to let you shadow them. Basically, stand beside them. I've had new agents I've offered this to. I'm shocked at how many people don't take advantage of this when offered the opportunity. I know a lot of people don't go to the office nowadays, but if you can sit next to that person while they're on calls, if you can join them in an appointment, ask an experienced agent, hey, got any listing appointments coming up? I can come to. I'll keep my mouth shut. I won't say a word. I'll sit in the corner with my arms crossed. Just to be there as a fly on the wall is hugely valuable.
Well, why don't we talk about like the pricing and risk? So when you're looking at homes and you're looking at like how to price a home for a customer that you know the home they usually how it goes is like I just saw that my neighbor sold for a record price and now I want to sell. Like how are you having that pricing conversation with that seller?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, lately I haven't had a lot of challenging pricing conversations. The market has been growing, the prices have been growing, and inventory has been low. So it's, even a few years ago when the prices kept growing and growing and growing, but we saw more transactions, it was, hey, my neighbor just did this person just did that. Now I'm not seeing as many of those challenging conversations because number one, the prices are growing. Most of my sellers lately are happy with the price that I'm predicting for them. And also, there's not a ton of comparable recent sales that they're looking at. Usually, it's me bringing some information to them that they don't have, as opposed to, 7 years ago where I was taking the information and the data that they were looking at and misinterpreting and trying to help them to properly interpret that to get them to reality. Now, it's usually the information that is most relevant to my pricing is not public data like we were just talking about. This is what I'm seeing with the bidding wars that I'm dealing with, the buyers that I'm working with, and the listings that I have, and where the offers are coming in, and what the type of activity is there. So there's conversations a little bit easier currently because my sellers don't have as many challenging preconceived notions going into that conversation.
I like that. So talk to me about like your actual business. So, you did 30 transactions, in a price point, frankly, I mean, you're between 600 on the low end, 2 million on the high end. A lot of agents nationally, are doing 1 to 2 deals a year at a much lower price point. Where is your business actually coming from today? Obviously you started out and it started out as a combination of like Sphere, your family, etc., people you knew. Where did those 30 deals come from in 2025?
So, and actually, the way I look at it is like we discussed earlier in the conversation, is digging down to the root source, the root cause. I do this at least once a year where I look at where my transactions came from, and I have a spreadsheet, and it's 2 columns: the source, and then I trace it back to the original source. If it was a referral, great, but where did I meet that person that referred me that business? And what I've found, the best commonality I've found amongst all of it, most of it's referral, repeat business. But really what I've traced it down to is most of it comes from in-person meetings, whether it's coming to my open house, whether it's somebody introduced me to them, whether I met them at a party, whether I sold them a house already, whether they were on the other side of a previous transaction and they were impressed with the work that I did. But ultimately, as much as we have all these lead sources, these digital lead sources, I find most of my deals originate with some sort of an in-person introduction.
It's really funny because you mentioned that you're tracking your leads, you're tracking your closings, and then you're adding where it came from specifically. And then you're mentioning that the majority come from face-to-face meetings. What's funny is that, the way we track all of our business, we use something called a greatness tracker. And it's simply, we track the number of phone calls we make and who we're making them to. We track the number of like cold emails we're sending to people that we know, cold social media messages we're sending to people we know. Basically, we track the actions that we are choosing to put out into the universe if they're a one-on-one action. We don't count mass emails and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But then the other big one we track on that is called break breads. And break breads is the number of actual one-on-one meetings that we're doing with someone, and they don't all have to be planned. They could be ones that just kind of happened. You ran into someone at Starbucks, etc. But those two numbers, the amount of outbound activities you're doing, plus the number of break breads that those are leading to, always equals a certain percentage of conversions. And the amount of agents, and honestly, any salesperson that isn't tracking that is, I think, really missing out on the number one thing that's in their control.
Yeah, so I found a really interesting kind of case study to support that. Is one of the things I do for marketing every year is around the beginning of the year, I send out a magnet calendar. People can put on their fridge. It's got my name, my information on it. And every month they tear off.
Did you need a DeLorean to find that strategy from 1988? Just kidding.
Funny enough, when I teamed up with my mother, one of the first things I said to her, "This is stupid. Who wants this stupid magnet tear off calendar?" And she's like, "You'll be surprised. People love this." And now here we are, fast forward 13 years. That's one of the things where I'm like, yeah, I'm all about it. People do love it. And
should we get your mother on the phone right now to tell her, yes, Mom, you were right.
You were right about this one thing. But the interesting thing I found with these magnet calendars is one of the things I loved about them is it wasn't just, here's a postcard, I'm going to throw it out. People would put it on their fridge and it would sit on their fridge all year. But oftentimes myself or my wife or other family members would meet somebody for the first time, whether it's a new job, a social interaction. And then the next time they would see that person, or a few times after seeing them, they would say, "Hey, you know what? I just realized that you or your husband are on my fridge." So what I found was really interesting is these people were putting my magnet with my face on their fridge. Every morning they were opening that fridge, looking at my face, seeing my name, and possibly for years. And to them, it did not resonate until they had actually met myself or someone somewhat related to me. And then when they went back, next morning they go to open the fridge, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, I know that guy." But when they initially meet, they don't say, "Oh, you're the guy on my fridge that I see every morning." It didn't resonate until that actual in-person meeting happened.
I love that. It's funny because, I always have my realtor's magnet on my fridge. My top realtor sends me the Michigan State sports schedule with his information at the top. And then an agent that I have bought some investment properties with sends me a list of helpful resources of different people in the community I might want to keep on the fridge at all time. It has poison control's number, so I don't have to Google it if my kid's, eating a berry or something.
Yeah.
Some of these old school things just work really well.
When I think like that, I think those are good reminders about you, but they're not necessarily going to bring in a new business from a stranger.
Yeah, you always need kind of like that mixture, right? You need the stuff that you're doing in the community and the stuff that you're putting out there to meet new people. Then you also need how am I going to stay in touch with people that I already know in a meaningful way? And it also depends on how well known you are in your community in the first place. Because if you went to high school there, you played sports there, you did stuff there, more people will know you, and so those random magnets you might send out or the random marketing will actually hit a lot harder if you at one point had a reputation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, Ryan, this has been awesome. Tell me, if someone has a client that wants to buy in, Essex, Morris, New Jersey, how they get a hold of you? What's the best way to find you?
Probably the two best and easiest to remember ways to find me are either through contacting me through my website, bruinrealestate.com, or via my Instagram handle, Bruen Real Estate. So they can follow me, see my content, see some of my thought pieces, and as well as message me directly through there.
Well, you heard it directly from Ryan. Thank you so much for being on the show. And for anyone listening, if you want more great guests like Ryan, feel free to please leave a review on the podcast platform of your choice. That helps agents like Ryan to come to us, find us, helps the show go on. So everyone, thank you so much, and we will talk to you on the next episode.